All right. Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the Hebron Board of Education regular meeting of Thursday, December 19th, 2024 to order. The time is 6:01 p.m. If we could do a roll call.
Start. Kim Levin, board member.
Allie Nato-Schmeisel, board member.
Sarah Coppolino, board secretary.
Joe Margottis, vice chair.
Heather Pettit, chair.
Tom Beard, superintendent.
Alicia LeMay, board member.
Caitlin Schillar, business manager.
Don Briere, Director of Educational Services.
Thank you so much. We have both of our principals here, Mr. Larkin, Mrs. Ariano, of course, Amelia, and Nikki.
Yeah.
And Nikki Matthews, board member. All right. Thank you so much. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, Dr. Baird, retirement recognition.
All right, we're going to have Mr. Larkin and Dr. Briere come up, and we're going to celebrate Mrs. Montessorian and Mrs. Porter.
Mrs. Porter was a very much valued member of our team at HES and had been for 22 years. And before that, a part of the GHS team for 2 years, for a total of 24 years of service to the children of Hebron. We were very sad to see her go, appreciated her commitment and advocacy for her students, her generosity to all, and her collaboration. We're also thrilled to say that Mrs. Porter is still with us, subbing for us on occasion, and we couldn't be happier to see her back amongst her school family, and we wish her the very best retirement.
Thank you so much. Congratulations, and also thank you for staying as a sub.
Hi, everyone. To my left is Mrs. Montessorian. Ms. Montessorian has been in Hebron for 23 years. Before starting in Hebron in 2001, Stephanie taught for 6 years as a special education teacher in Santa Ana, California. Students there only spoke Spanish, which is a little different than Hebron. After her first son was born in 2000, she moved closer to family in Connecticut. Some of her fondest memories were co-teaching with Kathy Jurglis and Carrie Miranda in most recent years. You may be wondering, where is Stephanie going after Hebron? Somewhere warmer.
Oh.
After Christmas, Stephanie and her husband are driving to South Carolina to move into a beautiful new home, complete with her dream kitchen and screened-in porch. As a dog lover, her next career will be walking dogs and dog sitting. We wish Stephanie all the luck in the world with her next profession and hope she takes us with her. Congratulations.
Dave is that, AKA paparazzi.
One more. Perfect. Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you both again for all your dedication to our students, for all these years, and for everything that you've done for them, and I'm sure with our staff as well. And so just thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you for staying. I wish you all the best in your warm climate.
And don't feel like you have to stay for the evening. You certainly can if you'd like. But
You're welcome to, but since you're retiring, you might not want to. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
All right, next is student liaison report, and Amelia, thank you so much for joining us. I like your festive outfit.
Thank you. Okay, so in kindergarten, students celebrated this time of year by making gingerbread houses with their families in their classes this week. First graders have traveled around the world using homemade passports. They have learned about different cultures and holiday traditions in their travels. Second graders are learning how to add and subtract two-digit numbers on a number line. In shared reading, they are learning about many different Native American tribes. They have also been doing a nice job being role models in the cafeteria, being safe and kind. Third graders did an excellent job at their first chorus concert last week. In math, they have worked on rounding multi-digit numbers and estimating their sums and differences. Third graders have also been learning how to add and subtract 2- and 3-digit numbers using algorithms and other methods. In shared reading, they have learned a lot about minerals, rocks, and soil. Third graders are currently learning all about topics related to weather. Fourth graders have been working to craft personal essays on topics they feel strongly about. They have included strong evidence to support their thesis and reasons. In math, they are wrapping up their fractions and decimals unit. Addition, subtraction, place value, and measurement are up next. Fifth graders have been working on crafting 5-paragraph literary essays about short stories, texts, including making a claim and supporting it with evidence. In math, fifth grade just finished learning about multiplication and division of fractions, and now is heading into multiplication and division of multi-digit numbers. In social studies, we've moved on from the age of exploration into the early colonial period of American history. Sixth graders recently completed a unit on rates and percentages. They are now exploring the meaning of division and learning to divide fractions in various contexts. This includes revisiting geometry problems involving fractions, which were introduced in Unit 1. In reading, sixth graders have recently focused on identifying themes and stories. This wraps up our deep study of character unit. We will launch informational reading when we return from break. Our choruses in Hockapella had an amazing winter concert on December 10th. The bands had a wonderful concert last night as well. We congratulate some of our sixth grade students for getting into Eastern Regionals for both band and chorus. The FPS teams completed practice problem 2 and problem solved a scenario about rising sea levels. 3 of the teams placed first in their evaluator group. The qualifying problem for the state bowl will take place the last week of January. There are 30 student inventors currently participating in this year's Hebron Invention Convention. We can't wait to see the designs they come up with. And GHS and HTS students were able to raise $2,060.82 for CCMC PJ Day.
Wow, that's amazing. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That was very detailed, and I appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for Amelia? No. Thank you so much, Amelia. I hope you have a very happy holiday.
Thank
A
you for
nice
your report.
Christmas break. Thank you so much. Okay, district advancement plan updates, preschool planning update, and wind block.
We'll start with the preschool.
I'm going to move.
All right, so this is just a brief update from our presentation last month. I just wanted to highlight some of the changes to the finance part of the update that we gave you around our preschool program. So in terms of the special education program slide, you may recall at the end of this slide last time, there was a mention that there would be some savings in health insurance that would be helpful to offset some of these costs. Well, that has changed since last month. We've had people enroll in insurance starting in January, so that savings is no longer. So just wanted to mention that, because that's a changing dynamic. In terms of the additional classroom, the fourth full-day classroom that we talked about last month, there was a lot of discussion around the need of a van for transportation with the staggered arrival. And there was an ask for us to go back and relook at that, see if we could be creative. Alicia brought up the idea around how we might group students for like services and if that could be a way to tackle the transportation challenge. And there were some questions around if we're at capacity, are we just gonna need a van anyway? So I'll take that last part first. So, we really kind of are at capacity. We're a student or two away from needing additional transportation. However, we don't necessarily foresee that we're going to have an additional student or two that would cause us to need an additional van. Now, that could change tomorrow, but kind of to the board's point, if that were to change, it's more because of the students with disabilities needing transportation, not because of changes in the preschool setup. Because we were able to look at grouping some students who have transportation needs in the classrooms that would start, I think, at the earlier time, or the later, or vice versa, right? But we were able to group them together. Our concern about doing that before was, what if we have somebody who needs transportation mid-year and there may not be room in those particular classrooms? However, when we sort of looked at that challenge again, we, thinking about being creative, we do reserve some spots in preschool for students who enroll mid-year. So if we reserve them in those specific classrooms, it would leave room to, for either a student enrolling who needs transportation, or if transportation needs changed for a student, we could offer the other classroom. They would have to change classrooms, but that could be an option. So with all that being considered, we removed the van from the equation. Again, I think at this point, if we needed an additional van next year, which we're not budgeting for, we're not foreseeing that we're going to need the van, but if we did, it really would be around, there's a students with disabilities need, not a preschool-driven need for that van. So how does that change the overall finances for that fourth classroom, right? So, and I know I emailed this out, but I just thought it was important to kind of go over this. So if you remove the transportation cost, you're now at a overall cost of $58,000, which is far less than we were looking at a couple of years ago, for a number of different reasons that we talked about last time. And then I can just tell you, because we made these updates back when we were originally going to have a resource management meeting that was twice weathered out, so we never actually had that meeting. So December 5th, we were looking at around 58,000. Since that time, we're close to putting the 25-26 budget to bed and finalizing the book, because that will be the focus of our January meeting in a couple of weeks. So the actual figure, because these were all just really rounded numbers without specific staff members, right? We're looking at just less than 55,000 for this fourth classroom. So I also adjusted the slide around preschool, or the different tuition options you may want to consider. So really not up for discussion tonight, but again, just for your perusal and consideration as we lead up to that discussion and decision, what the additional cost of that fourth full-day classroom would look like at different tuition increases. At this point, the budget you're going to see on January 9th will not include any tuition increases factored into that budget. You can, of course, make a change later and make decisions around tuition later, and then that could be part of offsetting the overall budget figure. But you can see that there's definitely some options here for you to be considering. And that's all I'm planning on talking about tonight, because I think we'll have a lot more conversation as we get into the actual budget conversation in January, February, and March. But happy to take any questions.
Question. So could you go back one slide?
Yep.
so there's a one-time, in that 58, we'll call it 58,000 now,
Mhm.
that 25,000 is baked in there. So
Correct.
So there's the ongoing costs per year
Correct.
would be what?
So the ongoing cost would be the 58 less the 25.
Okay.
I think it's actually 24, and the number is really 55. So we're still talking round numbers. So if you look at this next slide here, after you take away those one-time costs, you can you can see the overall cost. If you increase by $250 a month, is $42,250, less $25,000 as an ongoing cost. Now, of course, there's contractual increases for the preschool team, so there will always be some increases from year to year. The other thing that is just unknown is what step-up teacher will be hired,
Right.
what insurance changes will happen from year to year. We originally, this year, budgeted for around $35,000 sort of general fund expense for general preschool. But then with 2 people not electing insurance, it was down to essentially nothing. Now with somebody hopping on insurance mid-year, it's back up to like 15,000. So that number is just gonna fluctuate kind of all the time, depending on what different salaries or insurance options people have. And we won't really know, frankly, until like next September or October, because we also, we're assuming that all seats will be filled. We also don't know exactly what school readiness sliding tuitions, are gonna look like. So this is all just projections at this point. And we won't really know until September.
So just, if we raise tuition by $750 annually in
Mhm.
year 2,
Mhm.
we essentially be at a net zero.
You would be.
Okay.
Yes, for the cost of the fourth full day classroom. There is still some additional general fund dollars that are funding the other 3 classrooms, but not any more so than any other year. And what I had suggested last time is that if you were to go, I'm not suggesting go to 750, that's all for you to decide. But if you were to go to 750, you would be more than paying for the ongoing cost of this classroom, because you would be beyond the $25,000 startup cost. So I think if you did go all the way up to 750, I would push you to, or I'd recommend, it's a nicer way to say it,
Gently push.
that you then lock that in for 2 years, like just say and we're not going to consider an increase the following year because we've increased it so much this year. So that's just something for you to consider. Most years I feel like we've increased tuition, but we have not every year.
That's certainly reasonable, right?
I agree. Kim?
You had mentioned there's certain spots that are saved in classrooms.
Yep.
Preschool classrooms.
Correct.
So when we're full, we're actually not full?
Yeah, yes and no. So maybe Dawn can answer this question better than I can, but there are spots that we reserve for students who will be identified throughout the year, and some of those students are already sort of pre-identified, but they're not age eligible yet to start, so we know they're coming on a certain date, so we have spots that we're holding.
So what happens for students in the Birth of 3 system is that system speaks to our system the year prior. So we know each year how many students have what are called IFSPs in the Birth of 3 world, and we transition those students across the school year when they turn 3 into our programming.
Okay. Because that would play into tuition, or no? These are non-tuition or sliding scale tuition, potentially students.
Yeah, we have more students with disabilities that are guaranteed a seat. They're not paying tuition for their half-day program. Some have a full-day program, but most have a half-day program. So that will impact the tuition dollars that we're charging for other seats because they just wouldn't be available. So everything right now is just a projection. And like I said, things change over summer. So we can't 100% accurately budget, well, really for anything, right? But especially for preschool. There's a lot of moving pieces. And last year, we were saying that we were gonna have $35,000-ish of general fund expense for non-special ed preschool programming. But then in September, it was looking like, no, it's gonna be 0 because we just had 2 people not taking insurance. And now it's looking more like 15. So, but we have had all the seats full that we thought we would in terms of tuition dollars coming in. But if we have a class of 17 and only 12 enroll, then we're not gonna have the tuition then coming in to fund that program.
The potentially saved seats are non-tuition, so it wouldn't impact the number.
No, because
That
we
was-
have those every year anyway, so
Got
that's
it.
not factoring in. It's just what classroom they're assigned to. By changing which classroom they were assigned to, it eliminated the need to have the additional van.
Got it,
Yeah.
thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I really like the number I'm seeing. I'm just speaking for myself.
I'm just curious, so I'm out of the, preschool age, right? I'm just wondering, does anyone know like the going rate right now for preschool? In a private?
Do you mean in a school
Yeah.
district is quite different, in
Yeah,
my
yeah.
opinion, personally,
Yeah.
than a private,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, like
So
what's the
what-
market right now for,
So when we've looked, we've been on the high end,
Uh-huh.
and other programs haven't necessarily increased their fees, so we continue to be on the high end, and you certainly will be if you increase it again.
But I think it was hard when, I know that Dr. Briere tried to do that as well, but like a lot of the districts do 3 days a week or 4 days a week, but half days, like, to really like get a comparison, it would have to be like the exact program we have.
yeah, I mean, just
This
like in
many
general
half
compared
days,
to like
this
the
many full
private,
days.
So, yeah, we just ran it last year, for our conversation.
like a daycare based.
And they were all over the map because, like Mrs. Pettit said, there's so many different variations of models within school districts.
Yeah, yeah.
We also last year compared to private programs,
Yep.
and that's a different story.
Okay.
So as far as public school comparisons,
Yep.
it's hard to have a reliable comparison point. It's apples to oranges. However, we are at the higher end, if not the highest end. In comparison to private programs, that's not the same conclusion we drew last year, just because those costs are higher. So just something to keep in mind. We also then concluded the implications were private programs have longer day opportunities
Yep.
year-round,
Yep.
so a lot of variables to be considered
Yeah, I
as we go
remember
through the
that.
conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. So wind block, Zach. Oh, Mr. Larkin. I'm giving you a boost.
Good evening. So this is a brief overview of the WIN block at Hebron Elementary School. I hope that it answers some of your questions about the WIN block. Happy to answer any others that it does not. So what is it? WIN is an acronym. It stands for What I Need Now. It was formerly referred to as the intervention block, and it's a period of 30 minutes per day that is in the master schedule for each grade level. And why does it exist? It exists primarily as a strategy to address SRBI, or scientifically research-based intervention, which is really the pre-referral process to special education. So when IDEA, the law governing special education, was reauthorized in 2004, RTI, response to intervention, which Connecticut likes to call SRBI, scientifically research-based intervention, was in the law as a pre-referral process to special education, meaning that we had to intervene in an increasingly intense way with students before considering them for a special education evaluation. So the WIN block is a strategy to address that process. So what is tiered intervention? So tiered intervention is small group instruction, either with a classroom teacher or a reading or math specialist or interventionist, that is in addition to the core instruction that students would be getting with their classroom teacher. It's increasingly intense based on student need. So if student needs are greater, it's smaller group, more frequent meetings, up to and including 1-to-1, 5 days a week. We identify students as in need of that level of intervention through our universal screening assessments. The major universal screening assessments that we administer 3 times a year in reading is the DIBELS assessment, which measures, there are several subtests in DIBELS, all of which measure an area of reading. And in math, we use an assessment called Acadience. That assessment has 2 parts. One part is about problem solving and one part is about computation. So we administer those assessments to everybody, and that's sort of our initial scoop or screen of students who might be in need of further intervention. So that graphic there on the left-hand side of the screen is indicating that core instruction what we would call tier 1 instruction, the instruction that everybody gets who walks in the front door from their classroom teacher, should be sufficient to meet the learning needs of about 80% of the students. About 15% of students might need more than that in order to meet grade level targets. So that would be our tier 2 instruction. So they're getting core instruction and they're getting something in addition, probably from their classroom teacher. The tip of that triangle, that 5%, those are the students that we consider to be in need of tier 3 instruction, which is the most intensive instruction that we provide, which is very small groups of students, no more than 3 students in a group is our goal, and it could be one-to-one instruction, and that's happening with a reading or math specialist or an interventionist, and like I mentioned, that could be 4 to 5 times a week. Go back here for a second. So what's happening for students during the WIN block? So that's a 30-minute time, like I mentioned, for each grade level every day. They're receiving tiered intervention. What about students who don't need that tiered intervention? So the students who are in that green portion of the triangle there, that 80% of students, what are they doing during that 30 minutes? So they're typically using that time to practice with newly taught skills or concepts. It could also be a time when they are working on acceleration projects or programs that Mr. Parks might have available for everyone to participate in. So that takes care of our tier 1 students, our tier 2, our tier 3 students. And you see at the bottom of the table there are students with IEPs. So these are students obviously who are already identified. What are they doing during the WIN block? That might be a time when they're receiving some of their related services, speech and language. They might be receiving counseling during that time, occupational therapy or physical therapy. They might also be receiving some of their IEP instructional time during the WIN block. What we try very hard to ensure is that everybody is present in the classroom during tier 1 instruction, and tier 2 and 3 is in addition to that tier 1 instruction. When we identify a student as in need of that tier 3 instruction, we develop an intervention plan for them, and this is what that plan looks like. So this is a group of teachers who come together, including the classroom teacher, whoever will be providing the intervention. We look at the student's data, we identify a goal for them based on their data, and then we develop strategies to implement the goal. And then you can see there we also discuss what the progress monitoring tool is. So once we've identified the goal, we determine how are we going to progress monitor towards that goal to ensure that students are making progress towards that goal. So then we list the strategies that will be used. We identify what the student's intervention schedule will be, how often they'll be meeting with an interventionist, how many days per week, what the size of the group will be, and then we monitor them and we come back 6 to 8 weeks is the general rule, but sometimes depending upon the needs of the student, we might meet more frequently than that, and we'll make a determination as to whether or not, yes, this intervention is working, the student is making progress in closing the gap towards grade level achievement. So they might, move within this triangle between tiers 2 and tier 3. Ultimate goal would be that they would move back to tier 1. Or sometimes the conversation is, the student is not making the progress that we would like for them to make. We're going to increase the intervention, move them perhaps to a tier 3 intervention. If students who are in a tier 3 intervention are not making progress, then we consider a referral to special education to see if there's some learning disability that might be impeding the student from making grade level progress. And that sort of is the summary of the WIN block. Any other questions that I didn't address?
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Larkin?
I'm just curious, it's not specific to WIN, but I'm just curious, without getting into like the weeds of data off the top of your head, trying to think about it, ask this, what's sort of like the typical trajectory, if you will? I know every kid is different, but is there typically movement among the tiers like throughout the year, or do you find that movement happens? Sort of, can you help me better understand kind of how that might happen? And I understand every kid is different.
Sure, I think it really depends on what we're intervening about. I think we find that when you move across the grades, in 3rd grade, we are sometimes still teaching kids how to read. We're teaching them to break the code, decoding and fluency and all of that. We tend to intervene more intensely with those students, and they tend to move, once they've figured that out, once they've learned that, they now then move to more of a comprehension-focused intervention, and that we see a lot of movement between tiers 3 and tier 2 from 3rd grade to 4th grade, and as they, the longer they spend with us, which is
Yeah.
certainly the trajectory we want to see, the longer they spend with us, the less intense the intervention seems to be.
Okay, thanks, thank you.
Thank you for presenting. It's helpful to know why that is in place and what it was called before. I guess one piece that was brought to my attention was just that, so we have a piece of our day, 30 minutes of our day, where 80% potentially of students that aren't receiving tier 2 or tier 3 have blocked out time where it could be maybe utilized differently, or they could get caught in a place where they're not getting challenged or receiving accelerated pace things or practicing things. So just talking about it is helpful, but just trying to understand where that falls.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly a challenge for classroom teachers during that time when they are intervening with small groups of students, ensuring that the rest of the class is engaged in meaningful activity during
Right.
that time. So we see a lot of collaboration between our enrichment specialists and our reading and math specialists about what should we be having kids do during that time.
Mm-hmm.
We frequently use some online applications during that time for our tier 1 students that accompany our word work program. And that accompany our math program, which is, meaningful curriculum-related practice that students can be doing during that time when teachers are intervening with small groups.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, next is public comments. The Hebron Board of Education values the public comment period as it represents an opportunity for members of the public to express their views to the board on matters within the board's authority. Procedurally, public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person, and citizens will be asked to identify themselves. All comments must be directed to the board and not to any individual board member or individual member of the administration. The board administration will not respond to questions or engage in dialogue during the public comment period. The board administration will determine when and how to address questions that arise during the public comment period. And with that, are there any public comments? All right. Seeing none, moving on. Approval of minutes. So can I have a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of November 14th, 2024 as presented?
So moved.
Joe moves. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Kim seconds. Any discussion? No? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thanks, Nikki. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, chair's report. I don't have a lot to report. I would only like to let the board know that on November 20th, Dr. Baird and I met with the town manager, along with Richard Steiner, who is the chair of the building committee. Sorry, Dave. Mal,
Peter Casper.
Like,
Peter Casper,
Donna,
no. Peter Casper, the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and Mal, because he is on the school building committee. They wanted to meet to discuss the roofs for both schools. And Dr. Baird can speak more to this during his report, but really it was around the cost of the roofs, and that we voted, or the town voted previously in the budget to put money toward their roofs, but, you know, we really have to vote for the project now, so they're going to have a town meeting in January. I don't know if they've come, do they have a date? It's going to be in January, they're going to have a town meeting. I would ask the board to go and also get other folks to go. There's going to be several items on the agenda that don't have to do with us, but the roofs for the schools are on there, just so the town has to vote on the funding at the town meeting so that they can apply for the grant in January. My guess is the application period for the grant, if they want to apply in January, is between January 1st and January 10th. So my assumption is it's going to be, if they're still planning, and at that time they were, to apply in January, it'll be early January for that town meeting. In addition, there was some discussion in regard to the buildings and the state of the buildings, the town buildings as a whole, but also our school buildings. I know Dr. Baird has talked about that previously. You know, there's a draft evaluation or building study that was done that potentially identified millions of dollars of repairs that have to be done at both of our schools. And so just the small group had a discussion about, you know, if you're talking about, I'm just, you know, roughly, you know, over $50 million for repairs at both schools, does it make more sense to potentially look at a new school, like new ones, you know, a new school, alterations, renovations to our schools, rather than, you know, potentially spending over $50 million to fix dated schools. And, you know, there's other discussion about whether or not, if that ever came to pass, if like one of the school buildings would be used for a town building, public works, parks and rec. So those discussions happened, and I believe the outcome was that the building committee, and maybe the town manager as well, were going to look into having a consultant come in and kind of do an assessment. And you had brought up Willington, I believe?
Yeah.
And you can speak to that. But kind of do assessment, like what is the best way for what's the best way for the community to move forward? Like, what's the best thing to do for our schools, as well as like financially? So I don't know if you want to speak to that study. I didn't.
Yeah, the study would break out, if you keep on doing projects in the sort of like how we are with capital improvement type work, what will it cost over 20 years, whatever it is, to like do all the work, compared to a renovate as new, compared to a new build. So to look at all the different variations you could consider, and we'll do a cost estimate of all of those different approaches. And then it's up to and if you are gonna go for a new build, or I think a renovate is new, I think you have to have done that kind of study anyway.
Yes.
To show that this was a cost-effective approach to the project.
Yes. And there are considerations. There's like cost for square footage in regard to enrollment restrictions, and you know that wouldn't be reimbursable if it was above that. So there's those kind of things. So that study would potentially do that. So that's something I think they're going to look into. I don't think it's something that's going to happen like next month or anything, but I just wanted to let you know that the discussion was there.
Yeah, essentially we asked the town manager to include in the town budget the cost of that study, so that we could have it done next year. The cost for Willington was, I think, $32,000 for that study.
Yes. And it wasn't just, I mean, obviously, Dr. Bear and I were there in regard to their schools, but they're also looking at, there's a lot of the town buildings, not that aren't the schools, that are also needing like significant repair. So there's talk from the town manager, like how that bonding would look. Like, would it look like a bonding for the town as a whole in some of the buildings? So there's those discussions as well. Nothing concrete, and like Dr. Bear said, just the ask for the study. So we'll see. But I wanted to let everyone know. That's all I have. So now it's Dr. Bear, Superintendent Report.
All right, so I'm going to move through this pretty briskly tonight. You have my written report. I'm just going to do a couple of highlights here. Under District Advancement Plan, just the bottom two speak to some collaboration work happening across the elementary districts around our literacy program. So there is a lot of good work happening between the three elementary districts going currently. Heather just spoke to the second bullet in the technology facilities and food service area. The third bullet talks about the HVAC work that we've been discussing. We are getting close to making a decision around modernizing the control systems in both schools for the heating systems. So I know I've spoke about this before, but we have two different control systems in both schools, a really, really old system and an old system. And we're looking at modernizing both and bringing them under the same system. And so we've engaged with the building committee around those projects. This would not replace the other bigger HVAC work that's needed. It's like it needs to be better than it is currently, and this will help buy us some more time while we're continuing to do the bigger HVAC work. And it will likely lead to a cost savings in our service contracts for our heating systems. So more to come by next month, but we did include in your line item transfers that Mrs. Shalar will talk you through the cost of that modernization of the control systems in both schools. It's a little bit more than $30,000 per school. And like I said, we're working with the building committee. Mr. McKinney's been working with the HVAC consultant that we have who's been working with the building committee to make sure that anything that we're doing could potentially would most potentially be able to be used with the other future HVAC work that's going to happen. So we're not just spending $60,000 and not being able to then use the equipment later when we're doing the bigger HVAC work. So I will highly, highly recommend that you approve that line item transfer for this work to be done. We really weren't sure if we were going to have the funding or if we need to go to the non-lapsing account. But right now, Mrs. Schlar is feeling like we can absorb it within the operating budget. So that is my recommendation, is for you to approve that and we move forward with those projects. And we're really between two different companies. One we've used, and then a different company we've not used for this type of control system, but is a company we use for many other control systems in our school. So there's a benefit with both of them. We're kind of waiting for the second cost proposal to make a final decision. I wanted to talk a little bit about the HES Playscape. So the Board of Selectmen approved the immediate repairs using ARPA funding. So we're looking to schedule that with, there's two different companies that we're using. One to repair the existing big Playscape areas, but then a different company, our sort of newer preferred vendor, to replace the swing set, the same company we've been using across town and who we worked with for the Playscape here. So that is moving forward. We thank the town for that, and we thank the federal government for that funding, really. We also completed, you may or may not have noticed that the lines look a lot better here at Gilead. So we repainted the lines in the parking lot and did some preventative maintenance on the parking lot at the end of the summer, but the lines were painted more recently. You also have the indoor air quality forms that were completed for each school included in your board packet. They need to be made available at a Board of Ed meeting annually, so you have those in your packet and available for the public. And then the second phase of the HVAC study, the state-required study that we transferred some funds last month, is moving forward. So we're going to have that completed. And that's going to be a cost savings in our budget build next year, because we originally were funding phase 1 this year, and we were going to fund phase 2 next year. But we're doing the second phase of the 2 phases in the next month or so. The other thing under other items of interest is I just want to make you aware we updated some policies on your behalf with legal updates from Shipman. The EastCon Superintendent Group has been meeting pretty regularly on our legislative agenda and strategizing about how to move some of that policy initiative forward at the state level. We did meet with the commissioner on December 12th. It was a cordial and respectful meeting, and we have high hopes, so we'll see what the legislative session brings. We are going to be meeting with the Commissioner of Early Childhood next month. We're really trying to advocate for more preschool funding, more, whether it be for the district or just in the community, because Eastern Connecticut is a child care desert, they call it. So child care preschool is a huge need in this part of the state. So we were advocating for funding there. And then there was an ask when we were looking at the calendar in November just like, would we want to explore doing 2 years of calendars at once? So I reached out to the other Region 8 districts. There was really no desire to broach that right now, but kind of like with an idea of like, let's revisit it again next September, October when we're developing the next year calendar. I think some of the concerns raised here were shared by the other superintendents. Like one superintendent, Dr. Hagman over in Marlboro, her previous district always did 2 years of calendar. She said every time we were revising it. So I know that, Sarah, I think you brought that up, just a concern about if we do 2 years, like how committed are we to it, and you know, might we have to revise it? And that's it.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Shawar, the business manager's report.
My report is pretty short this week because our facilities and technology updates are still with Dr. Baird. So I'd like to mostly highlight food services. This month, I was able to take some time to do a little deeper dive into what our revenue and expenditures are looking like for this year. And so I just want to talk that through. If you were to look at the food services financial report, that's one of your enclosures. You can see on that report, the first section of, 2/3 of those account codes is a sum of the projected expenditures. And I've revised the budget column, that first column with the figures in there, to get a better handle on what I think the expenditures will be for the rest of the year. We're looking at about $341,000 to run our food services program. And that's based on current staffing, what food costs appear to be, based on just the price of food and milk right now, and how many students are utilizing the program. That's really been fluctuating over the past couple years because we've had free meals for all, and then free meals for free and reduced students, then free breakfast for all, and and now we're whittling that away. So we currently just have free breakfast for students who qualify for free and students who qualify for reduced priced meals. So all of our full pay students are paying full for breakfast and lunch, and of course it's affecting some of the utilization of the program. So that too is impacting our revenue. So the second section of account codes there shows that we're looking, and this is a real moving target. It is very difficult to anticipate. I've been working with our contracted food service director on this too, and she is going to be digging into our numbers a little bit more, but her response to me was, yep, if we had a crystal ball, just because there's so many factors, who's utilizing the program and things like that. But with the information we have available to us right now, it's looking like we're going to have about $228,000 in revenue this year. Which puts us, the very last number on that report is $112,000 in deficit this year. There are a couple things that I already talked about, meal utilization, but we have lost some stable funding. That was state funding to support some of those free meals. And then the other thing that puts that like such a big difference in expenditures versus revenue is that because of the COVID funding that we had in the past, we were carrying a balance of more than 3 months of operating costs, which you're not able to do in a non-profit food service program. So the state requires you to spend down those funds at the end of the year. And saying, we know we're going to be having a deficit next year is not something that they can approve. So we looked at our kitchens, we identified some really, really old equipment that we had, and we made a couple equipment purchases. We did it last year, we did it this summer. So we spent about, I'm not gonna say it off the top of my head because I don't have, about $25,000 in equipment because we had to and because we had a need. So that's why you've got this big $112,000 discrepancy between your expenditures and your revenue this year. It's not going to be as intense in future years because we're done with our investments in the equipment in the cafeterias for right now. We did have carryover funds when we closed out July 30th of on June 30th of last year. So some of that $112,000 is going to be paid with just funds that are in the account, but that's only about $80,000. So all of that said, at this point, it looks like the general fund's going to need to begin to start subsidizing the food services program again this year, as it kind of historically had for every year pre-COVID. And we're looking right now like it's going to be around $29,000 this year. I don't have a transfer request right now for that money because I feel like it's a little too early in the year to feel like that's a really firm number. And when I get to transfer requests, there were some bigger things that we wanted to tackle right away, but perhaps next month or the month after, we'll be doing that transfer request to move those funds over. So not great news, but important to share. And then I just also put a visual right in my narrative report for you, so you kind of see that it's that red and blue bar graph, and you can see over the years how, way back in fiscal year 2018, our expenditures were higher than our revenue, and more, and years beyond that, which I didn't include in this report. But then over time, you can kind of see the COVID years where we had that revenue outweighing our expenditures and what's happened, and now sort of where we're projecting going. The years are in reverse order because it made sense to me when I did it. Hopefully it makes sense to you. That's how my brain was working. So you see like next year's projection is the first thing you see, and then backwards.
So one thing I think it's important for people who have been on the board prior to COVID, so Heather and Joe and Allie for a period of time, it used to be that the offset to the food service program was pretty standard, but it was more like 20,000 maybe. Could you speak to a little bit of like how there were some things that were done in kind then?
Yeah, so there were some employee benefits that were always coming out of the general fund, but they were flagged as in-kind expenditures, as well as property services. So anytime we needed an electrician or a plumber to come in, any sort of like hood inspections or grease trap cleanings, those kind of things were always just charged to the general fund as in-kind services. That is a way that a district could report that, but pretty much since 2020, we've been putting all of those expenses into the food service program so we can get a really clear cost of what those expenditures are and where they're coming from, so that when we need to do any sort of Board of Ed offsets, it's a clear picture of all of the dollars that you're spending to support the food services program. So this figure will look higher than it had historically, and that's why.
The other thing that you had talked to me about was how our cafeteria manager, our food service director, and you are looking at meal utilization, menu options, bringing back maybe some a la carte options. Another suggestion was to go back to printing and sending home the menu, because we had switched to just sending that out electronically, but that was the suggestion, was to start printing it again. So,
yeah, the idea was that having a printed menu on the refrigerator at home might spark somebody to more quickly look at the menu and decide that they wanted to get a school lunch that day. So that was a thought that we had, and we're looking for some feedback on if
That would definitely inspire my kid.
Yes, that would work in my house. Yeah.
I just know
agree.
I didn't print it off in September, and I've printed it off since then, and we've been buying more school lunch, so sample size of 1.
seeing some other head nods there.
3, sample size of 3.
So it makes me think of a few things, because on the wellness committee, we've been talking for a couple of sessions now just about the nutritional value of what is on the menu, and I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but is it an EastCon menu that's designed, or a contracted out service through EastCon, so like Lisa is not designing the menu?
So in years past, EastCon was designing our menu. We don't contract with EastCon anymore. We have a different food service director. But really, our food service manager, Lisa Bennett, is doing the majority of the meal planning at this time, which has been helpful, honestly, in reducing food waste.
Yeah.
Because she is in the kitchens, she knows the food that we have on hand and is able to plan menus based on the Connecticut required nutritional value, serving sizes, offerings. It's quite a puzzle to put together. It's like, you know, certain colors of vegetables that need to be offered certain numbers of times in a week, and you know, among others. It's not just always just like, have your meat, have your fruit, have your vegetable. It's like, and then cycle them all through, and then make sure you're using your. So she's doing a great job, I think, to work to make sure that we're meeting all of those nutritional requirements and not wasting any food in the meantime, and saving us some money because we're not paying the additional money to contract out the menu planning too.
Yeah.
And I know that Lisa's really committed to looking at the overall program. When we were hiring her, that was one of the things that was an ask from both of us, was looking at both like the quality of the food that we're serving, the nutritional value of the food, also looking at the environmental impact of the food service program overall, packaging, et cetera. That was something that we talked about quite a bit. And honestly, I think that moving away from EastCon for food service has been a really good move for us. And so I think it's going to take some time. I mean, some of the menu planning that they're doing around some cost savings has been as simple as, all right, the garlic knot is more expensive than the breadstick, but it's pretty much the same thing. Easy for me to say, I guess, but it saved a few pennies, but a few pennies times how many kids times how many times do you serve it begins to add up. I think we're definitely going to have to look at the price of the meal in the spring as we're thinking about next year. You know, we didn't raise meal price last year, so I think that that's something that we're going to have to look at. We're also looking at, like I said, the a la carte options, bringing some of that. Some of that we stopped doing during COVID, it never really brought back. So we're looking at doing some of that, and also doing some more marketing and work around staff meal options. So that's not something that's necessarily been a huge focus for us either.
That's what I was gonna ask about.
Yeah. So it's sort of an all of the above strategy that we're kind of taking a look at, but it's going to take some time.
I wonder if it's something we could talk about at the wellness committee in January, if there's any menu tweaks we can do, if there's any redundancies in what's offered, and we're still following all of the Sudoku puzzle of rules that, and for reimbursements, right, and cost savings from purchasing, right, through government contracts.
Mhm.
Right, you get a cost savings for that. And maybe in January you could talk about too, because I'm hitting you with a surprise question. There's local food monies, correct? Like are there certain funding that it can be used for local food purchase? No? Like-
We do have a small grant for some local farm purchases. So I had reported on that last month. We were able to get some, you know, in the warmer weather, some lettuces and peppers. I can't remember what else. There were
Yeah.
4 or 5 different vegetables we were able to get, and then some cider from a local cidery. I don't know. And we're still getting that right now. We unfortunately can't get any more of the vegetables just because it's
Yeah.
too cold. But yes, we do have a little bit of. It's like a couple of $1,000s in
Yeah.
grant funding for that.
I think maybe some families too that are looking at the nutritional value of the meals might purchase more too if it's more like real food on the menu. I know the donuts are yummy, but it concerns me with how many are offered
on a monthly basis. or
Yeah, I know the
monthly-
breakfast always is a concern with what that looks like. I understand about the breakfast.
And the redundancy of like a milk, a fruit, and a juice. So, I know that's not you.
Feel free to write to your federal delegation as well. It's-
It's true.
Just in terms of what might help for staff, and it's possible that this already happens, but an opportunity to like order lunch ahead, and kind of plan for the week. Just thinking about ways that, obviously, I'm assuming there's a greater profit margin on the staff meals than on the student meals.
Yes.
And it might help some busy families.
Dr. Beer has brought up a breakfast sandwich option as a desire. So,
With bacon.
No donuts.
I think the challenge too with the food service program that we haven't really talked about is that in a K-12 district, your high school is oftentimes bailing out your elementary program because of the à la carte college-style nature of the program. And so you're making a huge profit off your high school, which is offsetting your deficit at the elementary level. And so we don't,
Start off
that's
on
not an
seltzer
option
water.
for us, but
Yes to all of that.
Start giving students open lines of credit, you're good.
Yeah.
well,
They'll always get cookies.
And seltzer. A lot of money on our account for seltzer water.
Yeah? I don't know. The pretzel, we have a lot of pretzels on our thing. I do think, I don't know if you use an app. Well, I guess it wouldn't matter because you're not à la carte. Never mind, it won't matter. Forget it. Because I do think the app is kind of good for parents, like older, like you can see what your child is eating.
It's,
You can see it for the elementary school.
yeah.
Can you?
You
Yeah.
couldn't
Oh,
a
yeah.
couple years ago, but now you can.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
I didn't know
Okay.
that. Very nice.
Oh, yeah, I track that from breakfast.
But I agree with the written, because in the morning when you're rushing around, like, I'm just speaking for myself, I'm like, I don't know what it is today. Like, I don't have time to, so having it like readily available, I do think would help.
as a former high school faculty member, I mean, you did. You like went to the cafeteria. I mean, it was like teachers were freely buying all sorts of beverages and food, and just it's a different world.
All right, so we'll move forward printing that menu, see if we can increase that meal utilization. We will continue to look at our offerings. I mean, we're always doing it and always trying to better ourselves, and I know it's slow, but it's slow and steady, and we will
It should be in color and like decorative. I know that sounds weird, but
color. We're looking to
expensive.
save some money.
I know, but, I'm just saying, like, fall
We'll send it off to
leaves,
the
like
students. They
January
can color the menus
snowflakes.
before we send them.
It goes a long way, I'm just saying.
So anyway, not to take any more time with food services, I'll just move on to the transfer requests that I have for you today. So like I said, the food service deficit is not included in this today. But the very first line you will see is, it's several lines related to excess cost funding and our calculation based on actual students and actual programs this year. It of course can change a little bit, but it's pretty close to locked in for the year. So this is why we're requesting a transfer at this time. So the first line with $75,000, our excess cost funded expenses are going to be less than we budgeted. So there's a line, if you remember last year, we had to do some manipulation with the way that we were reporting it. So there's a line for what were the funded expenses. So we're decreasing that line by $75,000, and then we're going to increase the line where the revenue will go by $75,000, so that those all balance to zero at the end of the year. The tuitions special education line is where all of the expenses that are beyond that 4.5 times, that 70% calculation, anything above and beyond that, that calculation is what we're on the hook for, 4.5 times our per pupil allocation. And we have about $55,000 in savings there. We had one less outplacement than we had budgeted for, so that altogether with some changes in needs there saved us $55,000. That funding is moving primarily to the paraeducator line. We had to increase some paraeducator support in the district this year, so you see that 56,000. The next two lines
And
are.
I'll just add too, like, remember when we budgeted, we said, you know, we don't necessarily know we're gonna have all 4 of these outplacements, but we didn't budget for any students in district support. So if we have a savings in outplacements, we're going to then have a need in the special ed support, and this is now kind of reflecting exactly that.
So the next two lines are moving funding from independent evaluations, where we don't think we're going to be using as much money as we originally budgeted for, to a line to provide some additional training for some of our special education staff. The next 4 lines are all helping to fund that those HVAC building upgrades that Dr. Baird was talking about earlier in his report. So the electricity costs, we budgeted at this time last year for what we were having this year, and then in the summer, our consultant said, you need to increase those by 50%. So I came and I asked you, let's move 50% in. Well, now as we're going on, it's looking more like 30%, not 50%. So we have some savings. You had moved money into the electricity line, and now you can move a little bit of it out. So that's the 9,000 and 13,000. There's also some 27,000 available in a teacher line due to a retirement, and some additional funding available in the insurance line, just because not as many people elected insurance as we planned for. So those 4 lines together will help to fund this HVAC project for $33,000 per school. And then there's a couple more little items at the end for some professional development, some Medicaid reimbursement, and some technology needs and pension needs. Does anybody have any questions about anything here?
Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So, can I have a motion to approve the line item transfers as presented?
So moved.
Joe, is there a second?
Second.
Who wants it? All right, Sarah seconds. All right, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Committee updates. So policy committee, we actually met tonight before our meeting, this meeting. We talked about, so next month you will have the first read of some of the policies that we discussed. And then in February, the second read and possible vote. So we discussed the policy for field trips. It's really an update. You know, most of our policies, as you recall, we're trying to update to the Shipman recommended policies where we can. And really the change in the field trips would be that anything out of state would be approved by the superintendent, and if it was anything overnight, so like an overnight field trip, it would be approved by the board. Before we were doing both, but the like Dr. Baird could do like a day trip out of state, but overnight would still fall with the board to have to approve before that could occur. Sorry, I'm just pulling them out. And so you'll have the draft policy, but also like the regulation. We don't really vote on regulations, but just so you can see the regulation that goes along with it. And then we talked about, so this would be a new policy that we're required to have. And Mrs. Ariano, thank you very much, came to our policy committee meeting as well. So it has to do with the admission to the public schools at or before age 5, because as you know, the new law is that children have to be 5 years old by September 1st to attend school, or, you know, or they can ask for a waiver. So this is really putting the policy in place that we're required to have, along with regulations. So it will also help Mr. Ariano, when, as she's the only one that really does and can by law do the assessment. I don't know if she's over there. We did add a piece to like shipment recommended policy, because there's some nuances there. If a child is accepted earlier than 5 years old in a kindergarten program in another district, but then comes to Hebron, you know, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to be accepted like at 4 years old into our program. So it would be like, you know, admission in another school district, doesn't guarantee admission here. Still, the assessment still needs to be done. So these will all come to you, and you'll be able to read through them. Like I said, with the first read, they'll all be redlined and let you know. We did have some discussion around the time, place, and notice of meetings bylaw, so that is completely ours. I wanted to change, so we're gonna bring forward just to decide on our calendar for the following year by December 30th instead of November 30th, because sometimes with elections and other things, you know, November 30th is kind of early. We don't have to actually get it to the town clerk till January 31st, but we did discuss, you know, we're doing the board calendar, even if we do it in December, we can add January of the following year. It doesn't have to be just 12 months, so we're covered, so that could still be a regular meeting. And then we had some more discussion around, there's a piece in the policy about meeting time and place, which right now says 7 o'clock. And we have to end no later than 10 o'clock, and as probably Joe remembers, there are many times where in the past, if we went past 10, maybe during COVID season or budget season, we'd have to like stop and vote and say, can we continue? And 2/3 of the board would have to say, yes, we can continue, or if they don't, then we have to end right then. So there's that piece I actually, you know, and it also said like, our meetings start at 7, they end at this time. So I would really, there's a good language in special meetings that says special meetings of the board shall be held at a time and place to be determined and announced in advance of the meeting, basically in the agenda. And I'd like to take that language and use it for our regular meeting. I'm just cognizant of, and we did have discussion about it, so it's something we can discuss as a board as well, but you know, we can set 6 o'clock, but if there's new folks on the board eventually that can't do 6 o'clock, it's not really fair. They'd have to do 6 o'clock at least for a couple of months till they change the policy. So really taking some of that technical piece out, I'm just gonna run that by Jess Ritter, because we're gonna see her for negotiations anyway, to make sure we don't have to have the exact time in there. So those are some of the items. And then we also discussed student discipline, not to make any policy changes, but as we discussed, Kim brought up, had some questions about the student discipline policy, so we just kind of went over the discipline piece and behavioral interventions and kind of like what that looked like throughout the day. Sorry, that was a little long, but I don't know if Alicia, if you have anything to add that I missed?
Set it off.
All right. Sorry about that. Resource Management Committee, Joe.
We tried twice.
We tried twice to meet, and the snow and weather does not like us. Student Growth and District Advancement Committee.
Meet in the spring.
We're gonna meet in the spring. Correct. Which is there. Communications and community engagement. We haven't met yet, but we probably will, because budget season's upon us. We don't have a date yet.
We have a tentative meeting on the February 13th.
Right.
Oh, right, depending on,
And we
yeah.
can start working on the flyer.
Yeah. Negotiations Committee, we were supposed to meet, actually, on the 12th.
Last week.
And then the union representative had to, well, not our union, their representative.
Their representative.
Their representative had a conflict, so we're going to now meet in January. Building Committee, I don't know, Joe or Alicia?
So I attended a meeting on December 9th. However, there was also a walkthrough meeting to review with the state of the actual schools, so I feel like the information I have might be old, and I feel like Dave probably has more updated information, but I can report out unless you would like to.
You are gonna kill it.
You would be surprised. So there was talk of asbestos in the tiles. The asbestos isn't bothering anybody as long as the tiles just stay right where they are. The walk around was going to determine exactly which areas are most egregious and need to go. The discussion was around leaving stained tiles would be acceptable, but anything with microbial growth would not be acceptable. There are some locations where there is a need to have some modification or removal of roof drains. There was a discussion about whether or not we might find ourselves in a situation where the building wouldn't be ready to open in time, and if, given that concern, there was a need to push this project. Sounded like they were backing off on that, but that would be something that would be discussed at the meeting. I guess here there are some skylights that will likely need to be removed. And then the rest of it was really about the follow-up at this meeting that they were gonna have to walk around, and I don't have that.
Yeah, and I can just say, I know we sort of talked about like the town meeting to approve the funding for the roof projects, et cetera. I think right now there's a big question with the building committee, what exactly they want to tackle and how, and what parts they want to add into the project. I don't think a grant submission by January 10th is realistic at all. That's just not going to happen with what time we get back from break and budget. So I think the earliest we'd be submitting a grant is the beginning of February. But the last I had heard is they don't necessarily know what number they want to use at a town meeting, because they don't know if they want to just do the roofs or just do an asbestos abatement project first and then do the roofs the following year, or try to do it all together. There were also a lot of questions around the fireproofing that we did as part of the pipe replacement project at Hebron. There was a code issue that will become an issue here once they start opening the ceiling tiles. So they wanted to get a better handle on whether or not that had to be included. So I think that there's a lot of unknowns. And so one question they even asked was, well, with all of these unknowns with Gilead, even though Gilead is the worst of the two schools, should we just do Hebron because there's way less unknowns with that project? And so should we just do that one next summer and move the Gilead one to the following year? Because we have more time to study and make decisions about how to best sequence all the work that needs to be done. Because once you start doing the work, the fear would be, all right, now, with Hebron we started the pipe project early, remember, because we were closed. So, doing the fireproofing and some of those other things didn't become a huge problem with then getting your certificate of occupancy and reopening the building. But a lot of concerns around the Gilead project and just how much more work it is besides just replacing the roof. Because there's asbestos in many of the ceiling tiles. And so it really wouldn't make sense to not address that as part of this project. It's different than the floor tiles that are just sort of contained. The ceiling tiles, you could have a leak and then it's affecting where there's asbestos. So it's a very different sort of risk with that. So I'm not really sure when the town meeting is going to be honest, because I'm not sure that they determine what the project is going to be yet. That's my feeling.
Yes.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
Okay. And Joe, you were at one of the meetings.
I know there's a big push to get the town meeting to vote now in December in order to get the entire process moving, because if it's not done in time, the approval's not gonna be done, you're not gonna be able to hire contractors in time.
Yeah.
There has been another call for another special meeting, though.
Correct.
So I wonder if that will be a topic of discussion there.
I can't remember all of the details of that request, but it was something around like a cost estimate for part of the project. Yeah. There's a lot going on with the roof project here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. When do they meet again? Do they meet?
Well, the request for the special meeting came yesterday.
Oh.
And it's a busy week, so.
Oh, it's like around the holidays.
the request, yes, so I don't, think we haven't scheduled it yet, but.
But there's a meeting in early January as well.
They just scheduled one for the 23rd.
Of December?
So we'll keep everybody posted, but it's,
Oh, okay. Thank you.
and I will say this, I don't think we should rush. I know that there's like a push to like get the work done, but it is such a big project, it is complicated, there's a lot of factors, and we do not want to be like entering a project that we're not feeling 100% confident they're going to be able to open the building to start the school year. We can't put all of the kids at Hebron L.
Right.
So,
Agreed,
so
yes.
I don't think it would be awful if we have to delay a year, if like we're making sure we're taking care of all the different components and making sure we're feeling confident about the work that we're going to be doing. That's my personal feeling about it. So I don't, and I think, I'm concerned that there's a rush to, we need to have the special meeting, we have to have the funding, we've got to get the grant in, because we've got to get the RFP in. I'm concerned about the pace at which some of this is happening.
Okay. With the grant, even if it gets approved, you do have 2 years to start construction. So that's a bright spot?
Yep.
Okay.
Comes up quick, though.
Ally, PTA liaison.
Yes, okay. And I have this, I can send it also for the minutes. So the PTA is excited to share they received a grant from the National PTA called Ready Tech Go. It's a $1,500 grant, so we'll be hearing some more about that locally. They awarded scholarship dollars earned from the book fair to all grade levels and specialists to purchase book materials, books or materials for their classrooms. Lots of exciting opportunities they report on fundraising in the past month. Penny Wars they did in both buildings. They did a photo mini shoot, and the bake sale were all a great success. They also had a fundraiser through Minted and a give back night at George's, in which they will be donating 15% of the sales back to the PTA. They also recently collaborated with Mrs. Haynes and the Student Council at Gilead for a family movie night, providing popcorn, cocoa, and water for the event. And they wish everyone a safe and happy holiday season and look forward to many more great things to come. The next meeting, I believe, is January 7th.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Wellness Committee.
We're meeting when we come back on the 8th, I believe. And it looks like you wrote that down, but I'd love to pop on the agenda while we're
I've got it,
talking,
yeah.
just the menu, and maybe we look at solutions as expenditures too, not necessarily just revenues.
Okay.
School readiness?
School readiness, sorry.
The last meeting was the day of our last meeting, so there hasn't been a meeting since.
Okay. Old business is discussion and possible action regarding playground repairs at Hebron Elementary School.
So I think we probably could take this off the agenda after this meeting, because we've got the repairs scheduled, we've got the CIP request in for the replacement.
Excellent. And discussion and possible action regarding school building infrastructure. I mean, I think we can leave that on there as an ongoing topic.
Yeah.
For now, to see what happens in the next few months. New business, does anyone have any new business or anything they'd like to see on the next month's agenda? Just a reminder, the next month Dr. Baird will present the superintendent's recommended budget.
Yeah, we'll review about half the departments. Yeah.
Okay. But is there anyone have anything new they'd like to add? All right, seeing none. Board member comments. I did have one thing I wanted to mention, only because I forgot to say during my chair report. And I know we are not members of CABE, but there is the CABE Legislative Breakfast. So it's for Area 3, so it's our legislators, there's other towns, but legislators in the area to discuss like school-related topics, education-related topics, is on January 3rd from 8 to 9, but it's at RAM High School. So I did reach out to them because I thought it would be, it's in our district that we should attend. So she registered me, it didn't cost me anything. I asked Dr. Baird to go as well. But if you're interested, I don't know how many free ones they'll give us, maybe all of them, I don't know. If you're interested, let me know, and we can email Cabe. But I thought it was important to go, especially because it's in our district.
Or just crash.
Hmm?
Or just crash, just show up.
Yeah, just come,
Especially for people who work there.
eat some eggs.
Pop down.
Yeah, you could be like, oh, I randomly came through here because I'm just at work
Did you say
for 1
8?
hour.
Did you say 8 a.m.?
8 to 9.
And if school is delayed or canceled, the event is canceled.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. So if RAM or RAM,
Yeah.
which always is the same. Yeah. If there's any delay or cancellation, then it will not occur. So just let me know if that's something that interests you, or if you can
I'll try to go.
nonchalantly walk through for an hour
I'll nonchalantly
if you
walk
work
through.
there.
I would try as well.
Okay. All right. Any other board comments?
I would just give compliments to I got to see the first grade choral concert, and Karen Sandstrom did a fabulous job, and I know all the teachers helped with it too, with their boom whacker sticks, and it was wonderful, and well attended, and the third and fourth grade choral concert down at Hebron was
Yeah.
also
Yeah, I agree.
very
Yeah.
nice.
And
very
band
well
last night was
attended.
awesome.
Band
Band was so
concert
fun
was great last
Yeah,
night.
it was really fun.
Yeah,
So
yeah, so great job to everyone involved, we appreciate it.
Awesome. That's great.
It might be in Bright Futures tomorrow.
And with a
Just
picture,
maybe.
you gotta put through a picture. There's a lot of like wonderful things online. I know like we're not big social media like as a board, but I saw a lot of positive feedback about all those things online,
Oh,
so, yeah. All right, any other? Okay, so I will, next on the agenda is discussion regarding the superintendent's evaluation proposed for executive session. So I'd like to have a motion to enter into executive session at 7:28 PM for the purposes of discussing the superintendent's evaluation, inviting Dr. Baird to attend portions of the executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Joe moves, Ally seconds. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstention, okay. All right, we are in executive session. In there. us back in public session at 8:42 PM and out of executive session. And last on the agenda is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Joe moved, Ally second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions. All right, we are adjourned
Good night.
at 8:42 PM.